I've told these stories a lot, but you haven't yet told me to stop telling them, so I'm gonna keep going. When I was growing up, my dad and I spent many, many hours in the fall and winter at our beloved deer lease. There were 9 other families that shared it with us, and it was probably my favorite place in the whole world to be. It was close enough to town that I can remember when I turned 16 and I was able to drive on my own, there were school days where I'd rush out of school and I would skip tennis practice and I would drive immediately out to the lease for an evening hunt. And then I'd spend the night and I'd get up and do a little hunting the next day at dawn and then drive back into town for school. I loved it there. When I was 14 or so, we were up there one weekend in September or October. It was warm, and it was not yet deer season. We were getting all the feeders and the blinds prepped, right, and ready and cleaned out and good to go. There were some sections of fencing that needed repair, and so another of the families that were there had a couple of kids, and the 2 of them and me, we were told to take one of the hunting trucks and go fix the fence. Dad said the back was loaded with supplies and tools and the keys were in the engine, so we hopped in and off we went. Now, I was one of the smaller humans on the deer lease, and so I had already spent many hours that day climbing into feeder barrels to spray wasp nests and to clean out spider homes, and I was gross and I was tired. And then we hopped in the truck to go fix a fence that took 6 or 8 hours, digging post holes with small shovels and wrapping wire and just getting slammed by this chore and the heat. So it turned out to be one of my least favorite days ever at the lease. So when we got back, I can remember walking into our cabin and finding my dad napping. And I had my big old heavy snake boots on, so I started stomping around, making noise while I cleaned up to let him know that I was back. And he woke up and he's like, "Well, how did it go?" And I said something in the meanest tone of voice I might have ever used with my father. I said, "Well, it would have been nice to have a post hole digger." And then I stormed off and I went to the front porch. My dad kind of wandered outside and he was like, "Well, honey, we have that. If you would have just asked, by the time I knew what was going on, you'd already left." Now, there are really only 2 main choices you have in a moment like that, or at least I did. I perceived at 14 years old I could blaze through it in anger, or I could get kind of tongue-tied, right? And I did that. I got tongue-tied because I'd already did the anger thing. And it sort of dawned on me in that moment that I had made lots of assumptions about both the job and the tools. And I didn't really check the truck to see what we had, to wonder if there might be other things we'd need, to inquire about materials. I just sort of begrudgingly swept off to do the next hard chore. If I'd stopped to assess, to get curious, to ask, the work probably could have been done much more effectively, and I perhaps would have been a better helper for it, right? I thought about that story a lot this week when I read today's gospel passage. It has some hard things in it, right? John calls the entire crowd a brood of vipers. He calls them to task about not bearing the fruits of God. Anyone who isn't is getting axed and thrown into a fire. And I have to wonder, maybe you will wonder too with me, how on earth I would have reacted if someone had said that to me. "You brood of vipers. Don't you think for 1 second that you coming in here claiming Abraham as your ancestor means a thing when it comes to the wrath that's coming. The end of this passage calls that good news. I don't know if you heard that part. Now, the rest of John's teaching in this passage is crucial. It's crucial. All of his teaching that we've read today is crucial to preparing our hearts and our minds and our actions for the coming Messiah. It's crucial to our understanding of what our faith and our beliefs demand of our behaviors and relationships. But I want to suggest something else this morning for us to consider together as a crucially important piece of our life of faith together. And that is the crowd's reaction to John. See, the crowd could have just turned around and left. They could have been up in arms. They could have put John up on their shoulders like some kind of mob and thrown him into the river and never looked back. They could have let their anger at having their assumptions challenged boil over and take control. They could have done a lot of things when John made that opening bidding. But instead, they got curious. They set aside their own assumptions and egos, even just long enough to say, "What then should we do?" They didn't turn and run. They didn't attack. They didn't freeze. They didn't scoff or rebuff. They didn't accuse. They asked a question to seek understanding. Our Christian life sometimes depends upon our ability to set aside our own understanding, our own knowledge, our own practice, and to ask questions that might bring new answers or ways of being. And that kind of curiosity requires humility. You see, from that time to now, again and again, God is revealing to us the nature and manner of our salvation. Again and again, God is teaching us what it is to love God and love neighbor. Again and again, God is inviting us to do something new or different, sometimes especially in relation to what has been before. And again, we have a choice. When God's commandment or invitation or revelation seems hard, when it seems too different, when it challenges our assumptions or current status, we have a choice. We can dig in, we can get defensive, we can storm off, we can get our angry gestures out, or we can get curious like the crowd. It doesn't mean that tasks won't be hard. It doesn't mean being Christian is as easy as asking a question, although sometimes it is. It just means that we aren't done. God's not done with us yet. God is coming. We trust that truth. We even get so bold as to expect that truth in seasons like Advent. But we're not done just because that is true. We have to learn over and over again what it is to share a coat with someone who doesn't have one. We have to learn over and over again to share food with those who are hungry. We have to learn over and over again that God promises a future of abundance, not of scarcity, that there is enough for you and for me and for everyone else. We have to learn over and over again what it means to be satisfied with what we have instead of constantly desiring more. We cannot be so bold as to believe that God is done revealing anything to us. We cannot be so arrogant as to believe we already have all the answers and that God cannot do a new thing right in front of us, even within us. God can use even stones to raise up new children, right? In this season of expectation and hope, of reverence and waiting, let us remember to embrace the humility that leads to curiosity. And let us be curious enough to ask God each day, what then should we do? You can dig post holes with a trowel if you want. But maybe there's a post hole digger in the back that you didn't know about. Which one sounds better to you?